Hello and welcome back to our lecture series on English literary criticism and literature, keeping the NET and examination into our vision. We are conducting this lecture series so far. And for your kind information, what we have discussed so far is we have talked about the Old English period, then we have talked about the Elizabethan period, Augustan period, then we have talked about the Neoclassical period, Restoration period, and now after discussing a lot about Romantic period, we have shifted talking about Victorian period. In yesterday's lecture, we have been through a brief background of this Victorian period, which is quite famous, right? And we have seen how the fiction, in a way, prose, poetry, and the other parts got flourished. The criticism of the period, the prominent critics of the period, we have seen. In yesterday's lecture, we have talked about the two prominent figures. One is Matthew Arnold, by the way, and the other one is Lord Tennyson, right? We also have talked about the another prominent figure is Walter Pater, right? And now we are going to begin with Thomas Carlyle, who remains a very interesting figure of this period. Now, before we commence with this lecture series, continue with this lecture, I would like to bring your attention to this very interesting part, which is quite significant according to me. Is right that's what we have been doing since the beginning, right? Whenever we started talking about this very interesting period, the history of English literature and its all other segments, right? Now, as I always discuss that when it comes to prepare for this NTA net, sorry, net and the set examination, what matters the most is developing our own content, exactly, and keeping that content in a vision, keeping the MCQ style of asking the questions getting asked, right? So in a way, understanding the strategies, understanding the exam patterns, question patterns that are going to be asked in exam, and keeping the entire content ready accordingly is the utmost important matter of the preparation for the such a kind those and such a kinds of exams particularly. Now, when we are quite aware about the exam pattern, the question paper pattern, and the types of questions that are being asked, the kind of information that is tried to be seeked through the questions, the analytical angle, the various perspectives regarding this. Now, in this lecture series, we have been covering about, so far we are talking about the publication dates of the books and the works by those prominent figures, then various titles that were given to them. Then we are talking about various works they have been doing, they have contributed so far, and also we are talking about their work in a collaboration with other works, also their commentaries on other works. There are some poets, there are some writers, no, fiction writers who have written their own fiction. Alongside, they also have proposed their certain critical approaches, ideologies, the regarding the contemporary literature. Now, when we talk about their contribution in this multi-directional way, it is much more important to have this vast version with us. And thus, so when I focus very deliberately about developing our own content, that is, that is going to suffice the need of the answers to be required in MCQs exactly. What kind of answers we are expected to be given in MCQ matters the most. Exactly. And as I said, when it comes to solve those MCQs, having this vast content with us allows us, in a way, the entire content to realize which is, sometimes we are able to tick on the correct answers for sure, but sometimes our extra information about the provided options allows us to find out the right option. So like, let's say there are, traditionally there are four options: option A, option B, option C, and option D, right? Now, when we have got all those four options with us, option A, B, C, D, exactly, and there are, no, there is only one answer which is going to be the correct one, and all the options are confusing. But sometimes it happens that we are able to tick on the correct answers. Now, there comes a time when we are not sure about the right answers, but our information about, yes, I know about A and it is not related to the asked question, right? I know about A and it is not related to ask the question, then I know about B, it is also not related to question. I don't know about C, I know about D, and it is not related to question. So our options, in a way, provide us enough information to have their relevance with the asked question. So when you realize that three of the options provided have no relevance at all with the question, it means the answer is the last remaining option, because we don't know about it much and more about we know about the remaining three. So in a way, this is how our already developed content allow us, are you getting me, allow us to come up with the right answer, and so we choose the correct option as our answer. So when it comes to prepare these various, elemental factors about periods, the contemporary periods, the contemporary authors in those various periods, and definitely their work, their contribution, various comments on them. Now it is just not required about the, when we are talking about, let's say example, we are talking about poets from Victorian era. Now it is not required that there will be contemporary critics only who will make a comment on the works. Then there are also critics from later period who have been through the works of Victorian poets, and they also have made their statements, their critical analysis and appreciation about the works of the Victorian poets, right? So their comments are also important, and onwards the names get labelized provided them. So we are going to focus on those certain things. So in summarizing what we have been discussing so far, we talked about those prominent figures. Now, now let us revise in a 2 or 3 minutes about the Victorian period, the prominent figures, and how the literature that got produced in Victorian period got shaped very particularly. Looking at Victorian period, exactly a period that is considered as a the remarkable epoch in history of English literature after the enthroning of Queen Victoria, right? Queen Victoria became, the administrative, or in a way entirely head of the entire region, and from her uh, getting in the throne, this period is called as a Victorian period in English literature. Now, looking at the social and political and also economical expansion of Britain or UK, United Kingdom, the entire Europe, otherwise, we realize that this is these several factors have affected the lifestyle, and as they have not only affected the lifestyle, they also have affected the literature that got produced otherwise. Industrial revolution, various scientific inventions, exactly, then the political expansions, British colonies getting Europeans developing their trade and expanding their trade and export and import otherwise, and by that expanding their territories to establishing their colonies and getting the control of those regions very particularly. And so the migration taking place, the travel taking place, all those sort of things we realize, and we notice them otherwise. So we have got works of Tennyson, we have got works of Charles Dickens, we have got a work by Elizabeth Browning, again one of the prominent figures we have discussed yesterday. So these very figures remain very significant, and we find that some or the other way their work has considered, the certain elements are taken into consideration. We have got Charles, Darwin's theory of evolution of human beings. So the theory of evolution gets involved over here. We have got various technological advancements. So I want to say that though it sounds like an amalgamation or mixture of so many things, this has some or the other way had an its impact on the Victorian literature that got produced in that era very particularly. And so it is much more important to have these various points in our mind when we are analyzing the work of those various literary months, the greatest contributors for literature in Victorian period very particularly. And this remains very significant people to have and have an attention at these various points too, because in a way when I said more talking about the various options, some or the other way it remains a clicking for it remains like a clicking part for us in examination. Some or the other way we get clicked, yes, this is something I have read already, and you get the connections, and so these reminder factor works something like that. So I would say that your thorough attention throughout the lecture, your complete attention throughout the lecture matters the most, and your way of understanding and comprehending it is also quite interesting. So let's not waste our time much more on discussing what we have talked so far, and continue with our today's lecture, in which we are going to talk about the remaining people from this Victorian period very particularly. Now let us begin with one of the interesting character, or let's say an interesting personality from Victorian period who has played a kind of a great role is Thomas Carlyle. He was a Scottish philosopher, satirical writer, and essayist. He delivered lectures on heroes, hero worship, and the heroic in history in 1840, and he published a book from 1841. Now, in this work, he explained that the key role in history lies in action of the great man, claiming history is nothing but a biography of a great man. That's what is the statement actually. As we see him, philosopher and a satirical writer and essayist, his way of looking at history and is very phenomenal otherwise. Now, in 1837, he wrote The French Revolution, a history, uh, which inspired Charles Dickens' novel A Tale of Two Cities. Tale of Two Cities is again one of the remarkable work by Charles Dickens. And when it comes to see its inspiration sources, it was Thomas Carlyle and his work, The French Revolution. Exactly. So please keep in this mind. This is an interesting factor when it comes to refer. We may have a question in exam asking what inspired Charles Dickens to write a novel, A Tale of Two Cities? Option A, Thomas Carlyle's The French Revolution. Option B, option C, option D. We must be sure about Thomas Carlyle and his work, The French Revolution, a History. A book published in 1837 has inspired Charles Dickens to write his a very popular novel, A Tale of Two Cities. Moving ahead, Thomas Carlyle also wrote a novel, Sartre Resort, A Tale Retold. It is considered one of the finest works in 19th century. So we also have to keep in mind the name of this. This is Sartre Resorts, A Tale Retold is a title of his novel which got very famous. He was a great polemicist, the one who is one who has a controversial view. So he coined the term dismal science in economics, and his essay Occasional Discourse on Negro Question, which remained very controversial. Now in mathematics also, he is known for the Carlyle circle, a method used in quadratic equation and for developing ruler and compass construction of regular polygon. He married to writer Jane Welsh in 1826. Uh, his life of Schiller, his life of Schiller was first appeared in London Magazine in 1823 to 1824. Sartre Researches was published in a series in a France magazine. Moving ahead, looking at the overview of his works, uh, in on heroes, hero worship, and the heroic, he stressed the importance of individual and compares different kind of heroes such as Odin, Oliver Cromwell, Napoleon, Shakespeare, Dante, Johnson, Rousseau, Burn, then John Knox, then Martin Luther, and Prophet Muhammad. So, such are a list of works that he has, to whom he has described in a well way. His Frederick the Great is a biography of Frederick the Great of Russia. He died in London in 1881, and he was offered Russian Order of Merit in 1874. So he wrote Shooting Niagara and After as a recreation or a reaction of Electoral Reform Act of 1867. Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell were great influenced by the writings of Thomas Carlyle. So we may have a names of those prominent figures, Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell. Which are the two names who were inspired by the writings of Thomas Carlyle? It was Charles Dickens and Elizabeth Gaskell. We have to keep a note of those ideas. Now let us have a look at his major works, which is quite prominent again. And also we have got their publishing dates. The Signs of the Times got published in 1829. Then Sartre Resortes got published in 1831. Then Chartism got published in 1840. On Heroes, Hero Worship, and the Heroic in History got published in 1841. Past and Present, it's a famous work again in four books, got published in 1814. The Life of John Sterling in 1851. History of Frederick II, 1858, and The Early Kings of Norway is a famous work. Then Reminiscences of My Irish Journey and Later Day Pamphlets are some of his prominent works. Now his major works. Let us have a review of his major work. Sartor Resartus. It means tailor Retailored, written by Thomas Carlyle, and it was first published in Fraser's magazine in 1832 to 1834, but in the book form it was published in 1836. It is a commentary on the thought and early life of German philosopher Theophilus List. The novel takes the form of a long review, by an unnamed editor of the English publication, Fraser magazine, who is upon request reviewing the fictional German book Clothes, their origin and influence, by the fictional philosopher Diogenes Theophilus Durick, professor of things in general. Now it is subtitled "The Life and Opinion of Herr Theophilus Durick." Its narrator is the editor himself, and such is the overview of this novel that was published in Taylor Retailered. Sartre Resartus, Resartus is novel. Now, moving ahead, we have got one of the prominent figure with us is none other than Charles Dickens, who has literally moved the style of bringing fiction. His novels, his writings, his description, his development of character, his development of plot, his characterization, all such a kind of things are, in such a great quality which remain very significant, and we may definitely have a question on him, as he resembles as one of the prominent figures from Victorian period. Dickinson was born in Hampshire, England in 1812. His father was a clerk at naval pay officer, but in 1824 Dickinson's father was imprisoned for debt. Now the entire family was sent to Marshalsea prison except Charles Dickens. Now at a black warehouse, Dickens used to paste labels on the bottles for 6 shillings a week. He attended school from 1824 to 27 but left again in 27 because his family could not pay the due rents. Charles Dickens learned, now after knowing about his miserable childhood, we go move to his career. Short, he learned shorthand and began his career as a journalist. He worked for London newspaper as a parliamentary reporter for 2 years, and then after he joined the newspaper, the Morning Chronicle, where he wrote a series of sketches about London life that also included sketches by Bose, a collection of stories. His first literary experiment. Bose was the family name of Dickinson, and he took this name as a pseudonym. His first novel was The Posthumous Papers of Pickwick Club. Now, this title remains very much important for us, in which we find him highlighting that was Dickinson's first novel, and it titles with The Posthumous Papers of Pickwick Club, which got published in 1837, and this is regarded as a picaresque novel. Now, we may have a question that which was the first picaresque novel that Charles Dickinson has written. It is The Posthumous Papers of Pickwick Club, or The Posthumous Papers of Pickwick Club is a novel by whom which falls under the category of picaresque novel. So it is definitely by Charles Dickinson. This was published in a serial form in a monthly installments. Charles Dickens married Catherine Hogarth, who was the daughter of the editor of Morning Chronicle in 1836, but later both of them were separated. Now in 1850s, he suffered three devastating losses: the death of his father, death of daughter, and separation from wife. Now Dickinson's last novel was a mystery novel entitled The Mystery of Edwin Drood. This novel remained unfinished because Dickinson died in 1870 of a stroke. Now we have again this interesting factor for us to analyze, that it was the last novel by Dickinson was a mystery novel, and the title that The Mystery of Edwin Drood. Now this remains unpublished. His all novels of were published serially in periodicals, especially the two edited by him, Household Woods and All the Year Round. Both of them were weekly periodicals. He also wrote various Christmas stories, and a few among them which are famous are A Christmas Carol, Scrooge, Jolly Bob Cratchit, Tiny Tim, etc. Now, Charles Dickens got a lot of fame as a novelist because his novels reflected the social conditions which were prevalent in contemporary society. His novels are about the slums, the poor houses, the debtor prison, and the area filled with stark realities of London lives. Uh, Croyd is a biographer of Dickinson, actually, and let us have a look at the list of novels he has written so far. The Pickwick Papers is the first one, then Oliver Twist. Sorry, Oliver Twist, again one of the famous works that he has created so far. Then Nicholas Nickleby, then The Old Curiosity Shop, then Barnaby Rudge, Martin Chuzzlewit, then Dombey and Son, David Copperfield, again one of the remarkable and very famous story, which is yet studied as one of the remarkable edition of literary creation from Victorian period. Oliver Twist and David Copperfield are yet prescribed in many universities for the educational purpose, and so this remains, again an interesting factor to know about Charles Dickinson, in this way, to have a such a vast variety of novels that he has produced so far. After David Copperfield, we have got Bleak House, Hard Times, Little Dorrit, then a famous one, A Tale of Two Cities, then Great Expectations, Our Mutual Friend, and The Mystery of Edwin Drood, which he could not publish. Then we have got a list of his short stories with us. The Chimes, A Goblin Story, A Christmas Tree, A Message from the Sea, and Sketches by Bose. Sketches by Bose is also called the Illustrative of Everyday Life and Everyday People. It is a collection of 56 sketches divided into four sections are parish, scenes, character, and tale. Moses was a pseudonym which was taken from character in Goldsmith's The Vicar of Wakefield, and it was pronounced as Boses and shortened as Bose. So this is the sincerity of his writing. Now, Posthumous Papers of Pickwick Club is the first ever novel. This is the first novel of Dickinson, shortly called Pickwick Papers. It is a series of humorous sketches about the members of the Pickwick Club. It presents no, the episodes and amusing incidents which happened to the group of unforgettable characters, which forms the 19th century English club founded by Samuel Pickwick, who is the main character in this novel, very particularly. It is basically the journey to remote place from London by members of Pickwick Club throughout the English country, and the main character of these novels are Alfred Jingle, then Son Weller, Nathaniel Winkle, and Samuel Pickwick. It is the first picaresque novel of Dickinson. So we have to keep in mind the name of this novel, very interesting. Moving ahead, it's a very famous work, Oliver Twist. Now, the theme of the novel is a failure of a charity purity in a corrupt city and countryside. Now, complete title is The Adventures of Oliver Twist. The other title is The Parish Boy's Progress. We have to keep in mind again, this is the novel that has got with these titles by Oliver Twist. Well, exactly. So we have got the name is Oliver Twist. It is by Charles Dickinson, and the other title is The Parish Boy's Progress. So we may have a question based on this, that which of Charles Dickinson novels is given the name, or The Parish Boy's Progress is a name associated with which of the novel by Oliver Charles Dickinson. So we may get confused that it is with David Copperfield, but no, it is with Oliver Twist. It is a story about an orphan and illegitimate boy, Oliver Twist, who faces a miserable experience in a workhouse under the care of Mrs. Man Oliver. She only gives meager food to Oliver. Mr. Bumble, as a frequent visitor to this workhouse, he was an unsympathetic, cruel, and stone hearted man who did not care at all for the well being of orphans. Oliver is ill treated here and by his apprentice, Mr. Strawberry, along with Non Claypole, the servant of Strawberry. Both the apprentice made fun of Oliver's mother and even abused her. Oliver prepared to go to London. During his journey, he met Jack Dawkins, also called Arthur Dodger, who was a member of a gang of pickpocketers. Dodger took Oliver to London and introduced him to old Hugh Fagin, who was the head of pickpocketing gang. Thus, Oliver is once again trapped with. I'm sorry. Oliver is once again trapped with the illegal elements who were doing their businesses with lot of innocent children who now used to, I'm sorry, uh, who now used to drink alcohol, smoke cigarette, etc. Now in these gangs there were two girls also named Nancy and Bestie. Oliver now was under the supervision of this gang. One day he was caught by the police for nothing because the crime or he was caught was done by Dodger and Betsy. And because he was caught without mistake, so Mr. Brownlow, whose pocket was picked, felt a deep sympathy for Oliver and brought him to his own house, where he was looked after with a great affection and kindness. Oliver soon recovered from his illness and told his whole life story to Brownlow. Brownlow, and one day when Oliver was in a way for some work, he was seen by Nancy, who tried to rough him by using some powder to make him unconscious. When Oliver protested her, she said to the public that Oliver is her brother, and thus public allowed her to take Oliver away. Oliver again fell in the hands of criminals because Nancy took him to Pigeon once again. Pigeon gave Oliver to Bill Sykes, and again Oliver was forced to do robbery. After a lot of attempts, Mr. Brownlow came to know that Oliver is son of Edwin Lee Ford. Edwin Lee Ford was the intimate friend to Mr. Brownlow. Monks was again a legitimate son of Edwin Lee Ford and thus half brother of Oliver. After a lot of chaos, Monks agreed to surrender and share his property with Oliver. In the end, Nancy was murdered, and Bill Sykes while escaping through a rope that got his neck entangled and struggled a lot. Pigeon was traced and sentenced to death, and Brownlow adopted Oliver as his own son. Monk, after sharing his properties with Oliver, indulges into criminal activities and died in a fit. Thus, good men were rewarded and bad met their tragic end. And this is how this entire novel, Oliver Twist, ends on this note. Again, a very interesting one. Then Nicholas Nickleby, again an interesting work by him, which covers the complete title is The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby. It is the third novel of Dickinson, which revolves around the adventures of a young man, Nicholas, who has to support his mother and sister after his father dies. His father had lost all his money in poor investments, and the novel deals with the sad conditions of boarding schools. Now, Nicholas had to work as an assistant with a low pay to meet both the ends. And now, the story of Nicholas Nickleby first appeared in monthly parts but afterwards appeared in volume. The important characters of the novel are Ralph Nickleby, then Newman Knox, then Fanny Squares, Wackford Squares, Catherine Nickleby, and Kate Nickleby. These are the characters, his sister, mother, and he himself. The main goal of writing Nicholas Nickleby was to expose the ugly truth about Yorkshire boarding schools. Now, it is stated that most of the novels that Charles Dickens has produced are quite realistic and they resemble with the current or the contemporary conditions then. Also, David Copperfield or Oliver Twist are considered kind of like his autobiography because the characters that he has produced, and it is also noted that he might have been through these sufferings. So he's also regarded as one of the pioneering factor, pioneering figure of Victorian period, whose novels got a lot of fame, and the kind of characters and the situations and the realistic themes he picked up to develop his stories and plot accordingly. Moving ahead, his again one of the prominent work is Old Curiosity Shop. After reading this novel in 1841, Queen Victoria remarked it very interesting and cleverly written. Protagonist of the novel is Nell Trent, who lives with her maternal grandfather at the residence of the Old Curiosity Shop in London. Nell Trent is 14 years virtuous young girl who is an orphan, so lives with her maternal grandfather. She is very lonely and her only friend is Kit, an honest boy employed at the shop. Neil teaches Kit how to write. Circumstances changes suddenly and her maternal grandfather loses all his money through gambling and suffers a breakdown, and consequently Nell Trent takes her grandfather away to England and lives like a beggar. At last Nell dies due to her arduous journey and her grandfather who is mentally unfit, refuses to admit that she is dead and sits every day by her grave, waiting for her to come back until a few months later when he dies himself. The theme of Old Curiosity Shop is early death. The book was written in 1840, 3 years after the death of Mary Hogarth, younger sister of Charles Dickens's wife. Barnaby Rudge. It is also titled is A Tale of Riots of 80. It is a historical novel which is set during the Gordon riots of 1780, the anti-poverty riots. It was the first historical novel of Dickens, so we have to make a remarkable tip on this that Barnaby Rudge. It was the first historical novel. Exactly. So we have to make a list of novels. Exactly. The first picaresque novel or his first novel as such. So when we have got a list of these novels, we have to keep the names in mind. The famous one actually by him, Oliver Twist, Ever Copperfield, Tale of Two Cities, now Barnaby, exactly, and the beginning one actually, the boy, about the boy. So in a way, these novels are quite famous and they are to be kept in mind because we may have a question asked in the exam about them. Let's move ahead. The major characters of the novel are Barnaby, who is simple man, and his mother Mary. In the novel, Reuben Radel, a country gentleman, is murdered and the murderer is never discovered. His brother Geoffrey Herdel and the villain John Chester are enemies. Chester's son Edward is in love with Herdel's niece Emma. Once Edward saves Herdel and Emma and wins Herdel's favor for marriage, Herdel discovers the murder of his brother, the steward Rudge, and Rudge is hanged. Sir John Chester, now a member of parliament, turns out to be the father of Hugh and is killed in a duel by Geoffrey Herdel. Herdel escapes to the continent where he ends his days in a monastery. Barnaby and his mother live out their years tending a farm at the Maple Inn where Barnaby can work effectively due to his physical strength. Then next novel we have is Martin Chuzzlewit. The original title is Life and Adventures of Martin Chuzzlewit. It is considered as the last picaresque novel of Dickinson. The two great villains of the novel are Seth Pickensnip and Jonas Chuzzlewit. The main theme of the novel is selfishness. Protagonist Seth Pickensnip is a widower with two daughters, Cherry and Mary. He is the cousin of Martin Chuzzlewit, and the original name of he is the cousin and original name of him and Mary is Charity and Mercy, but they do not possess these virtues, neither charity nor mercy. Then we have got Dombey Son, again Dombey and Son. Full title is Dealing with the Firm of Dombey and Son, Wholesale, Retail, and for Exportation. He started this book in Switzerland before returning to England via Paris to complete it. The conception of the novel belongs to the years of the railway boom around 1844 to 47. The main character of this novel is Mr. Paul Dombey, who is a widower with two children, Paul, son, and Florence, a daughter. He considered Paul to be worth for his attention, and Florence was neglected. Paul was sent to Mrs. Pipchin, who is ancient and acidic, for the improvement of his health. But Paul died of an illness which shattered Mr. Dombey's hope for an year. Eventually, Dombey loses his business and wealth due to his misplaced trust in James Caker, and realized that his daughter was the only person who truly cared for him. Later, Dombey reconnects his daughter Florence and get an heir through his son-in-law. Dombey is led to marry a cold, disillusioned girl, Edith Granger, but she was not in love with him, so she runs away from him with Carker. Mr. Dombey's pride and his wealth both are taken away from him. At the end, he is found dependent on forgiving Florence and Walter Gay. In the eyes of Dombey, marriage was not about romance. Then we have got a very famous for famous novel of the century is David Copperfield. original title is The Personal History, Adventures, Experience and Observations of David Copperfield, the Younger of Blunderstone Rookery. It is an autobiographical novel by Dickinson. In the preface of 1867 edition, Dickinson wrote, "Like many fond parents, I have in my heart of hearts a favorite child, and his name is David Copperfield." David was born after the death of his father, so his early years were spent in the company of his mother and housekeeper, Peggotty. His mother remarried when David was only 7 years, and his stepfather, Edward Murdstone, used to trash him and finally sent him to a boarding school, Salem House. At the school, David got ruthless headmaster Mr. Creakle. After some time, his mother gave birth to a baby boy, but when David returned to Salem House after celebrating holidays at home, his mother and her baby dies. When he again returns home, he is sent to work under a wine merchant by his stepfather, Murdstone, in London. As David grows, he comes in contact with variety of characters, including his landlord daughter, Agnes Wakefield, who becomes his confidant. Uh, he marries the beautiful Dora Spenlow, but she also died of miscarriage. He remains he remarries Agnes Wakefield, who always loved him and had four children, including daughter Betsy. The great aunt of David renamed him as Trotwood Copperfield. The, the arbitrary suffering of innocence is the main theme of the novel, and so this is considered as the most popular and his autobiographical. Moving ahead, we have got again his one of the I'm sorry. Moving ahead, we have got his again one of the prominent work is Bleak House. This novel was published in 1852 and 1853. It is a romantic novel. The novel is a vigorous satire on the abuses of the old court of chancy. The delays and costs of it brought misery and ruin on its suitors. The tale centers in the fortunes of an uninteresting couple, Richard Carstone and his amiable cousin Ada Clare. They are wards of the court in the case of Janandis. They fall in love and secretly marry. The case of Janandis comes to an end due to sudden death of Richard. When Ada goes to live with Janandis, she is accompanied by Easter Summerson, a supposed orphan. Again, his famous work is Little Dorrit. The main theme of the Little Dorrit is imprisonment. The novel began in a prison. The character Little Dorrit, Amy, was inspired by Mary Ann Cooper, whom Dickinson sometimes visited along with his family. It satirizes it satires the shortcomings of both government and society, including the institution of debtors' prison, where debtors were imprisoned unable to work until they repaid their debts. It is written in two books. The first book is about poverty, and the second book about riches. The novel begins in Marseilles in 1826 with a notorious murder Rigord telling his cellmate how he killed his life. So looking at those novels, we have to keep in mind about the list of things, how these novels remain very interesting one otherwise. A Tale of Two Cities, the opening line of the novel is, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times, it was the age of wisdom, and it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity, it was the season of light, it was the season of darkness, it was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." These lines are very famous people in history of English literature. Whenever it comes to refer to William Charles Dickens, in a way, we always have these lines protest. This novel got published in 1859, and it is connected to French Revolution. Which of Charles Dickens' novel is connected to French Revolution or based on French Revolution? We mean to, just frankly, we have to answer that it was A Tale of Two Cities. The two cities in the novel are London and Paris. It appeared in the Dickinson's journal all the year round in 31 installments. The scenes shift from one city to the other. The chief characters of the novel are Dr. Manette, who suffered for many years in Bastille. Lucy Manet is a daughter of is his daughter who married Charles Darnay. Sidney Carton, the young lawyer who was in love with Lucy, sacrificed his life in order to save the life of Charles Darnay. Madame Defarge, the hard-hearted revolutionary leader, and Miss Pross, the protecting angel of Lucy, and Evamond brothers are villainous characters. Darnay was in a relation with these villainous characters and so was captured by the revolutionaries and only saved at the last moment by Sidney Carton. The novel presents a vivid picture of the city of Paris during the French Revolution. Again, his work we have is a Great Expectations. Pip, that is Philip Philip, is the protagonist of this novel, who is a young orphan living with his sister and her husband, Mr. Joe, in Kent. While Pip was sitting in a cemetery on the evening looking at his parents' tombstone, he was grabbed by an escaped convict, Magwitch. Magwitch asked Pip to bring food for him and also a file to cut his irons in the leg. Pip obeys, but the convict is recaptured. One day, Pip makes a visit to Satis' house with his uncle Pumblechook. At Satis' house lives Miss Havisham. There, Pip meets a young girl named Estella who treats him well. He falls in love with Estella and dreamed of becoming a wealthy man to become worthy of Estella. Now, with Miss Havisham's guidance, Pip is apprenticed to his brother-in-law, Mr. Joe, a village blacksmith, and Pip works in the forge unhappily. Orlick was a malicious laborer of Mr. Joe, attacks Mr. Joe and makes her dumb. Mr. Joe and makes her dumb. One day, Mr. Jaggers comes with news that a secret benefactor, actually the convict Magwitch, has given Pip a large fortune to go to London immediately to start his education as a gentleman. Pip misinterprets Miss Havisham as a secret benefactor. In London, Pip befriends Herbert Pocket and Wemmick, Jagger's clerk. He further he furthers his education by studying with the tutor Matthew Pocket, Herbert's father. Herbert and Pip started leading an undisciplined life in London, enjoying themselves and increasing debts. Pip again confronts Orlick but was promptly fired by Mr. Jaggers. Miss Joe dies and Pip goes home to attend the funeral. One night, Magwitch appears and reveals that he is his benefactor. Pip learns that Copison is the man who abandoned Miss Havinson and Estella is a daughter of Magwitch. Mrs. Havinson has raised Estella to break men's heart as a revenge for the pain of her own broken heart. Pip begins to care for Magwitch. Estella is married to Bendy Donnell. Pip makes a visit to Satie's house and Miss Havinson asks for forgiveness and Pip forgives her. Pip and Hubbard tries to let Magwitch escape to London, but in the meantime, Pip is attacked by Orlick, but Hubbard saved him. Pip Now, while Pip and Hubbard were trying to, in a way, make a Magwitch escape through the river on a rowboat, they are caught by the police. Magwitch and then Compeyson fight in the river, in which Compeyson is down, and Magwitch, is sentenced to death, and thus Pip loses his fortune. Magwitch died, and Pip falls ill. Joe comes to London to care for Pip, and they are reconciled. Pip learns that after robbing Uncle Pumblechook, Orlick is in jail, and his brother-in-law Joe is married to Biddy. Pip goes abroad with Hubbard to work. After many years, when he returns, he finds Estella in a ruined garden at their house. Her husband had treated her badly, but was now dead. Pip and Estella departs from the garden and in hand believing they will never part again. So such is the story about this entire character. Moving ahead, we have got his again one of the famous novel, Hard Times for These. Times is the complete title of this novel. It highlights the social and economic pressure of that time, and it appealed in a week. It appeared in a weekly installment in a periodical Household Woods. Now, the expression "hard times" means a period of depression when food is scanty, or when wages are low, or when unemployment is widespread. The major characters of this novel are Thomas Gradgrin, then Josiah Bounderby, then Louisa C.C. Harthouse, and Stephen, etc. The novel is divided into three parts, which are headed as sowing, reaping, and garnering. The novel takes a hard, unsympathetic look at utilitarianism. The novel suggests that the 19th century England's overzealous of industrialization and threatens to turn human beings into machine by thwarting the development of their emotions and imagination. And the another one we have is Christmas Carol. It is one of the most famous short stories of Dickinson, written in 1843. The chief characters of this novel are uh, Ebenezer Scrooge, then Bob Cratchit, Tiny Tim, Jacob Marley, the Ghost of Christmas Past, the Ghost of Christmas Present, and the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, and Fred, Scrooge's nephew. So, such is the brief background about the work of Charles Dickens and his kind of a contribution. Exactly, he's a famous like Oliver Twister, Oliver Twist, David Copperfield, A Tale of Two Cities, his a Picarovsky novel. Such are the prominent works that he has produced so far, and a kind of a different characters. So he remains one of the remarkable figure of the period, and thus it is quite appreciative to have such a kind of a wonderful personality with us that covers all those things. Right. Before we move to our next talk about Lewis Cowell, who is also one of the prominent figure from uh, Victorian period, let us take a break for some time, and we'll come back. Right. So, and good evening. Let us continue with our lecture series on understanding the prominent works from Victorian period. So far, we have talked about David. We have talked about Charles Dickens, and prior to him, we have talked about Thomas Carlyle. Let us continue with again one of the prominent figure from Victorian period. It is Lewis Carroll. Actual name is Charles Lutwidge Dodgson. He is better known for his poem named Lewis Carroll. He was an English writer, mathematician, logician, Anglican deacon, and photographer. In mathematics, he has written The Alphabet Cipher and The Game of Logic. It is said that he carried himself as a dodo in Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, referring to his difficulty in pronouncing his name. He was once wrote, I don't think I have yet written anything worthy of real publication, but I don't despair of doing so someday. His first piece of work was a romantic poem, Solitude, appeared in 1856. Martin Gardner labeled Carols as a Tory who was awed by lords and inclined to be snobbish towards inferiors. His poem, The Hunting of the Snark, is considered as a nonsense poem. This poem was dedicated to Gertrude Hathaway. Based on the original poem, All in the Golden Afternoon, Carroll reveals the rowing expedition on which he told the story of Alice's adventure in Wonderland. The War of Roses is symbolized as one of the chapters in Alice in Wonderland. Now, major works of Lewis Carroll, Alice Adventures in Wonderland, Through the Looking Glass. It is the sequel of Alice in Wonderland. Then Jabberwocky, a poem. The Hunting of the Snark, a poem. Then What the Tortoise Said to Achilles, and The Walrus and the Carpenter, a narrative poem by him. Now, talking about Alice's Adventure in Wonderland, the novel tells a girl named Alice falling through a rabbit hole into a fantasy world populated by peculiar and anthropomorphic, that is, deities and animals creatures. Alice is guided by a rabbit in the Wonderland. The genre of the novel is fantasy. List of all mankind allies: the white rabbit, the mouse, the dodo, the lorry, the eaglet, the duck, bat, bill, the lizard, puppy, the caterpillar, the duchess, the Cheshire cat, the March Hare, the Hatter, the Dormouse, then the Queen of Hearts, the King of Hearts, then Gryphon, and the Mock Turtle. It is completely a children's novel, and there are 12 chapters in this novel. Now, to the Looking Glass, its complete title is To Looking Glass and What Alice Found There. It is a sequel of Alice's Adventure in Wonderland. In this novel, Alice again enters into a fantastical world by climbing through a mirror into the world that she can see beyond it. It includes verses uh, Jabberwocky, the Walrus, and the Carpenter, and the episode Tweedledum and Tweedledee. Characters like Alice, then Bandersnatch, Hiya, then Hatta, Humpty Dumpty, the Jewels. So such are the list of characters we have got from him. And so Thomas Cole is famous for him. Going ahead is again a very prominent figure is William Makepeace Thackeray. Thackeray was born in Calcutta in 1811. He was son of Richmond Thackeray, an Indian civil servant, and his wife was Anne. After the death of his father in 1850, he was sent to England because his mother married again. He was educated at a school in Southampton and later joined Trinity College in 1829, but he left the universities without taking a degree and he went to Germany where he met Goethe. He tried his hand in law also, but dissatisfied and gave up. Also tried hand in art, but unsuccessful. He earned a huge inheritance, but lost everything in gambling. In 1836, he married Isabel and he moved to London and worked hard as a journalist. He was a regular contributor to Fraser magazine and he published 90 magazines. His first book was The Paris Sketchbook, and from 1842 to 1851, he was the staff of Punch. This earned him good income. During his stay at Punch, he wrote Vanity Fair and he died of a cerebral effusion in 1863. From 1860 to 1862, he was the editor of Cornhill magazine, in which were published the Roundabout Papers, Love of the Widower, The Adventures of Philip, and Seneschal. His history, if Pendennis, is a building some buildings Roman novel. Major works of Thackeray are Vanity Fair, The Book of Snobs, The History of Pendennis, the subtitle again, and looking at those very interesting titles is The History of Henry Esmond. Then a very famous one is Newcomes, The Four George, and a novel Four George exactly. Then Adventures of Philip and Henry Esmond, a historical novel, and the Virginias. Vanity Fair. Let us have a look at some of his works which are quite prominent. Vanity Fair is a novel without a hero. The title is taken from Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress, where Vanity Fair is the name of a shop in town called Vanity. Becky Sharp is the protagonist and anti-heroine of the novel. Becky Sharp's other name is Rebecca Sharp. Amelia goodness and sweetness is contrasted by Becky's wit and physical charm. Amelia is the heroine who is well liked by most of the men because of good personality. She marries George Osborne against the prominent figure we have got over here with us. So she marries her, and on the other hand, Becky is rather intelligent and interesting character we have with us. She is a talented actress, but she does not have the ability to get attached to other people and lies intelligently to get her away. William Dobbin is the only gentleman in the novel that we have come across, and so interestingly, we find him doing this. Now, the Virginias remains again one of the important work from him, and adding to that, which covers it tells a story of a twin grandson, George and Henry Warrington, on the outbreak of American War of Independence. History of Henry Esmond, again a prominent work by him. It is an historical fiction of Henry Esmond, a colonel in the service of a queen. It is a sequel of his novel, The Virginians. Pendennis is a complete title is The History of Pendennis, His Fortune and His Fortune. his friends, and his greatest enemy. Protagonist is Arthur Pendennis. At the age of 18, Penn fell in love with the actress Emily. The Newcomes, it is a sequel of Pendennis, Colonel Thomas Newcomes, and his son, Fleming. After that, let us move to understand a work by, again, a very phenomenal literary man from Victorian period, none other than Robert Browning. Robert was born in Camberwell, England. He is considered as the master of dramatic monologue, or the one who has propagated a dramatic monologue a lot. The speakers in his poems are often musicians or painters who functions as a metaphor to the society. He married to Elizabeth Barrett Browning in 1846, and in 1833 he published the first major work. Pauline P.B. Shelley influenced him to write it. The famous phrase, "God's in his heaven, all's right with the world," contrast with Thomas Hardy's "God is not in his heaven, all is wrong with the world," the test of the anthology. The Ring and the Book was written in 1868, and it is a verse novel based on a sentinel, no, it is a sensational Roman murder trial in 1698. He is famous for his famous line written in The Last Side Together, "Fail I alone in words and deeds, why all men strive and who succeeds." Then Paracelsus is a poem of Browning. The Ring and the Book contains 12 books and 21,000 lines. Uh, Strafford, it is a play by him for Macready. Browning called Italy as my university. One more word is a poem by Robert Browning addressed to his wife. Ruskin wrote about Browning. Robert Browning is unerring in every sentence he writes of the Middle Ages. About Sordello, many writers commented that they could not be able to understand the first line of the work. Who will may hear Sordello's story told. Browning was mostly self-taught and utilized his father's history, which contained more than 6,000 books. At the age of 16, he attached the University College in London, but a year later he grew dissatisfied and started learning at his own pace. He started writing poetry at the age of 12, and at the age of 18 he made his choice of profession, that of a poet, and under the influence of P.B. Shelley he wrote Pauline, which got published in 1833. Now it is a short poem which has a strong Shelleyan flavor. Pauline is considered to be dedicated to P.B. Shelley and his works, and is followed by Paracelsus, a dramatic poem based on the life of Swiss physician. The play Strafford was written by him for actor Macready, and Sordello, a long poem in heroic couplet, appeared in 1840. Now, from 1841 to 1846 appeared a series of poems called Bells and Pomegranates, consisting of a plays, dramatic monologues, and lyrics. And from 1846 to 1861, he produced Christmas Eve, and in 1855, he wrote Men and Women. After the death of his wife in 1861, he moved to London from Florence. He was awarded honorary degree by Oxford University in 1882 and University of Edinburgh in 1844. Uh, Again, a few of his prominent works is Ozolon was published on the day of his death. He was buried at Westminster Abbey. Uh, Rabbi Ben Ezra is an exposition of Browning's philosophy in the mouth of Rabbi Ben Ezra. It is a defense of old age against youth. And famous quote from his last leader is, "Just for a handful of silver he left us, just for a ribbon to stick in the coat." Oscar Wilde commented about Browning as, "He is the most Shakespearean creature since Shakespeare. If Shakespeare could sing with myriad lips, Browning could stammer through 1,000 mouths." Browning's Pied Piper of Hamelin is about a rat catcher in which a rat catcher moves out all the rats of the town. After it, the mayor of the town reneged on his promise to pay the ransom and refused to pay him the full sum. As a revenge, the rat catcher took all the children to a cave from where they never returned back, except three. One is deaf, one is lame, and one is blind. Fra Lippo Lippi and Andrea del Sarto are about art and painting. The theme of Fra Lippo is church's influence on art. Fra means brother and Lippo is the protagonist. In Andrea del Sarto is influenced by Raphael Leonardo da Vinci, and Fra Bartolomeo. The opening lines of Rabbi Ben Ezra, grow old along me, the best is yet to be. The major works considered the list that we have read so far entirely. So Pauline, then Paracelsus, then Stafford and Blot and the Sun, then Sordello, exactly, then Andrea and Del Sarto, then Abbott Vlogger. Okay. Now moving ahead, we have got again one of the prominent figure. Let's read about vlogger. According to Lionel Thrilling and Harold Bloom, uh, Browning's persona, a blogger, was an extraordinary extemporizer, particularly upon the organ. It starts with a line, would that the structure brave, the manifold music I build. In this poem, Browning does not assert the superiority of music to all other forms of art. He endorses within the poem his protagonist's belief that the creation of music reveals God's inspiration more directly than the composition of a poetry, which obey laws created by God but comprehensible by man. To achieve his purpose, we find him appearing to have employed for the creation of Aploger, a system of laws derived from Pythagorean and medieval number of symbolism as was appropriate to the poem's musical, philosophical, and religious concerns. That's all about his works. Let us move to again one of the prominent figures from this period, Oscar Wilde. He is an Irish playwright and a poet. He is remembered for his epigrams and his only novel, The Picture of Dorian Gray. You have to keep in mind when it comes to talk about his work very interestingly. He is remembered for his epigram. Who is remembered? It was ऑस्कर वाइल्ड. कोणाचं नाव लक्षात ठेवतात कशा करता तर ते आहे हिज एपिग्राम. याची जी एकच नॉवेल आहे ते काय नाव द पिक्चर ऑफ डॉरियन ग्रे. He was deeply involved in the rising philosophy of aesthetism, led by his two tutors, John Ruskin and Walter Pater. Now we talked about them when we talked about the Romantic period or the people who played a role between Romantic period and Victorian period. He wrote Salem in French in Paris, but it was refused a license in England due to absolute prohibition to biblical subjects on English stage. He wrote his masterpiece, The Importance of Being Earnest, a very famous play otherwise, also being prescribed for the importance of being earnest. He was convicted and imprisoned for 2 years in 1897, and he was imprisoned. He wrote the Profoundly, but it was published in 1905. It was a long letter about his spiritual journey to the trial, forming a dark counterpoint to his earlier philosophy of pleasure. After release, he left France immediately and reached Ireland, where he wrote his last work, The Ballad of Reading Gaol. The Ballad of Reading Gaol, a long poem commemorating the harsh rhythm of prison life. Wilde was a contributor to the journal Pall Mall Gazette and Daily Chronicle. Moving ahead, he published The Happy Prince and Other Tales in 1888. We also know about his famous story about Happy Prince. The Portrait of Mr. W.H. was first published in 1889 and the Blackwoods Edinburgh magazine in July 1889. Now, in January 1889, he published The Decay of Lying, a dialogue. He published Pain, Pencil, and Poison, a satirical biography of Thomas Griffiths. When right, the fortnightly review. He belongs to aesthetic movement. Oscar Wilde belongs to aesthetic movement and was inspired by John Ruskin and Walter Pater. The major works include The Happy Prince and Other Stories, A House of Pomegranates, Fairy Stories, The Picture of Dorian Gray, then A Lady Windermann's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, then An Ideal Husband, The Importance of Being Earnest, a play by him, and The Profound is an epistle. The importance of being earnest. It is a comedy play by Wells. Characters: Honorable Gordon Fairlex, then Algernon Moncrief, then Jock Worthing, J.P., Miss Prism, and Lady Brackwell. Importance of being earnest. A very interesting novel, interesting play by him. Moving ahead, we have got one of the prominent figure is John Ruskin from 1819 to 1900. John Ruskin was a leading art critic of Victorian period. He was also an art patron, uh, Scotsman, waiter, watercolorist, a prominent social thinker, and a philanthropist. He wrote on various subjects as geology, architecture, myth, ornithology, then literature, education, botany, and political economy. He was the only son of a wine merchant, John James Ruskin. His first major work was written in defense of J.M.W. Turner's a modern painters. In this work, he claimed that modern landscape painters and especially J.M.W. Turner were far superior to the old masters of the post-Renaissance period. In modern painters, he coined the term pathetic fallacy. Is this work is divided into 5 volumes. Moving ahead in 1869, he became first Slade Professor of Fine Art at the University of Oxford and established Ruskin School of Drawing. In 1871, he began his monthly Letters to the Workmen of Labourers of Great Britain, were published under the title Fors Clavigera. He established a School of Arts in Sydney Street, Cambridge, which later known as Angelia Ruskin University. And after the death of Ruskin, his works were collected in 39 volumes, library edition, completed in 1912 by Edward Cook and Alexander Wedenberg. In modern painters, he advised artists go to nature in all singleness of heart, rejecting nothing, selecting nothing, and scorning nothing. Pro Clavigera, it is a title of a series of letters he wrote to the workmen and laborers of Great Britain. Uh, in 1848, he married Effie Gray and dedicated his novel The King of Golden River to her. In 1854, they both were separated and he again fell in love with Rose Latouche, but after she died, he suffered an attack of mental illness. In spite of mental illness, he completed The Art of England in 1884. He wrote his autobiography, Praeterita, Outlines of Scenes and Thoughts Perhaps Worthy of Memory in My Past Life. In 1849, he wrote Seven Lamps of Architecture. Leo Tolstoy remarked about Ruskin as one of the most remarkable men, not only of England and of our generation, but of all countries and times. His The Stone of Venice is a 3 volume treatise on Venetian art and architecture. Mahatma Gandhi translated Unto the Last in 1900 under the title Sarvodaya. In the modern painters, he argued that the principal role of the artist is truth or nature. And this is the list of his major works that has been produced by John Ruskin so far. Moving ahead, we have got again an interesting figure who created kind of a remarkable, who brought a kind of a remarkable change in the reader. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, also referred as the creator of Holmes and Watson. He is famous English novelist and short story writer. He is chiefly remembered as the creator of the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. Many stories of Sherlock Holmes appeared in Strand magazine in serialized form. In 1902, Doyle wrote an influential pamphlet, The War in South Africa. His Waterloo is a one-act play. He popularized detective fiction worldwide and gave it a respectable place in literature. Edgar Allan Poe, The Murder in the Rue Morgue, is considered as first detective fiction in 1841. In 1926, he published his History of Spiritualism. He wrote 16 mystery stories, among them is the Sherlock Holmes. The loyal assistant of Sherlock Holmes is Watson. In 1890, his novel A Study in Scarlet got introduced the character of detective style Sherlock Holmes. He died of a heart attack on July 7, 1930. The first writing of Doyle was short story called The Mystery of Sasasa Valley. The second story, The American Tale, was published in London Society. At Tanglen Skene was renamed as A Study in Scarlet. In 1817, Arthur Doyle submitted two letters about his conversation to spiritualism to a weekly period called Light. Beyond the City, again a very famous work published in 1893, the Stark Munro letters and duet with an occasional chorus are the largely autobiographical ones. Novel about the Napoleonic era is called The Great Shadow in 1892. Now, in 1891, Doyle introduced Sherlock Holmes as a ghost in The Hounds of Baker's Baskervilles and later brought him back to life in The Adventures of Empty House. His major works include this list: History of Spiritualism, Marsh Clerk, The White Company, The Adventures of Sherlock Holmes, The Memoirs of Sherlock Holmes, and The Hound of Baskervilles. Sherlock Holmes is a fictional character created by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and it's full of detective stories. The character is appeared in print in 1887 and was featured in four novels and 56 short stories. Among the four novels of the famous are A Study in Scarlet and The Sign of the Four. The first series of short stories appeared in the Strand magazine, beginning with A Scandal in Bohemia. Out of 56 stories are narrated by Holmes' friend Dr. John Watson, while two are narrated by Holmes himself and two other are written in third person. Holmes' primary intellectual detection method is abductive reasoning. Lines from Silver Blaze. Is there any is there any point to which you wish to draw my attention to the curious incident of the dog in the night time? Sherlock Holmes responds to it as that was the curious incident. Again, a very prominent figure we have it with us is George Eliot. Let's get to know about her. She was born as Mary Ann Evans at Warwickshire in 1819 at Aubrey Hall. Her father's work, the management of estates, gave her wide experience of country society, and this was greatly to enrich her insight and the scope of her novel. She started her literary career with the translation of works in German religious speculations. Now, in 1851, permanently, she became assistant editor of Westminster Review, and she lived with George Lewis for 20 years without marriage. For this, she was disowned by her brother. Waverley novel of Walter Scott impressed her a lot, and she published a collection of essays, The Impressions of Theophorus Such, in 1879. After George Lewis died in 1880, she married to John Walter Cross, but she herself died same years. Her first published work as a poem appeared in 1840, published in The Christmas Observer, was knowing that shortly I must put off his government. Her first translation, Life of Jesus, was published in 1846 by George Chapman. Eliot's rejection by her friends and family over her relationship with Lewis is reflected in her novel The Mill on the Floss in 1860, thus an autobiographical novel of Eliot. So we have to keep in mind about her work, about this novel, The Mill on the Floss, an autobiographical novel by her. Adam Bede is her first full-length novel, which she described as a country story full of breath and cows and the scent of hay. Adam Bede was followed by The Lifted Wheel in 1859. Her Middlemarch has been described by Martin Amis and Julian Barnes as the greatest novel in the English language. We have to keep in mind about her Middlemarch, also a novel by George Eliot, very famous one and acclaimed by critics. Her first literary work was an English translation of Chaucer's The Life of Jesus. Queen Victoria was much impressed with Adam Bede and asked the artist Edward Henry Cobbold to paint scenes from the book. She finished her The Mill on the Floss, dedicating the manuscript to my beloved husband George Henry Lives. In her essay, Silly Novels by Lady Novelist, Eliot criticizes the majority of novels written by and for women, objecting to their silliness and disregard for reality. So we may have a question asked about her in her essay, Silly Novels by Lady Novelist, exactly, in which she criticizes the majority of novels written by and for women, exactly, objecting to their silliness and disregard for reality. So when it comes to understand her critical work, we have to keep in mind her critical work titles with Silly Novels by Lady Novelist. Now let us focus on her major work, Adam Bede, The Mill on the Floss, Silas Marner, The Weaver of Revlo, Romola, Romola, Felix Holt, The Radical, Middlemarch, A Study of Provincial Life, and Daniel Deronda. Moving ahead, her poetry is The Spanish Gypsy, a dramatic poem, Agatha, Brother and Sister, The Lifted Wheel, it is a novella, Adam Bede. Now, talking about Adam Bede, it is first novel of Iliad and it is pastoral novel set in the rural community of Heslop, Heslop, England. Heslop, it's a Heslop, England in summer. The novel revolves around the love rectangle between a beautiful, thoughtless Hetty Sorrel, Captain Arthur, then Jonathan, young squire who seduces her, Adam Bede, Hetty's unknowledged suitor, and Daniel Morris, Hetty's cousin. It is written in 3 volumes. The real village where Adam Bede was set is Ellaston. Adam Adam is a local carpenter admired for his integrity and intelligence. He is in love with Hetty. The plot of Adam Bede is famous, founded on a story told to George Eliot by her aunt Elizabeth Evans. Jonathan Burgess is Adam's employer at a carpentry shop. Now the plot goes like Adam is a local carpenter, falls in love with Hetty, but she is attracted to Arthur. When Adam interprets between them, Arthur and Adam fights. Arthur agrees to leave Hetty. Hetty Sorrel also agreed to marry with Adam, but shortly before marriage, it is discovered that she is pregnant. Now, in desperation, Hetty leaves in search of Arthur but could not find him. She delivers the baby but abandons the infant in a field but retrieves the infant again because she could not bear child cries, but till the time she child is dead of exposure. Hetty is caught and tried for child murder. She is found guilty and sentenced to hang. Dinah enters the prison and pledges to stay with Hetty until the end. Dinah is a Methodist preacher girl. When Arthur hears of her impending execution, he rushes to court and asks the sentence commuted to transportation. Hetty died just before she is set to return to Heslop. Ultimately, Dinah and Adam became aware of their love and get married and live peacefully with their families. The quote famous is, "It has been a hard day for three." Now, in The Mill of Foss, again a very famous work by her, it is the most autobiographical novel by George Eliot. The protagonist Maggie Tulliver is partially based on Eliot's own life, and character of Tom is based on Eliot's brother Isaac. It was first published in 3 volumes. Tom and Maggie Tulliver are siblings grown up at the Lockett Mill on the River Floss. The novel is most probably set in 1820s. George Eliot herself experienced lengthy relationship with a married man, George Henry Live. The book depicts a close, complex bond of brother and sister, Tom and Maggie, especially. Mr. Tulliver is also a chief character in the novel. At the end of the novel, both brother and sister are down in a embrace, and at the end of the book is given a biblical epigraph: "In their death, they were not divided." Then again, her last famous work is Silas Marner. The Weaver of Ravello is the third novel of Eliot. It is the realistic novel entering on a humble weaver, Silas, who renounces religion after members of his church blame him for the theft of the pouch of coins. This novel is set in 19th century. Silas Marner, a weaver, is accused of stealing the congregation's fund and is proclaimed guilty. He married William Dane. Chief characters of this novel are Silas Marner, Godfrey Case, and Johnson Cass. Then Romala again is a famous work. It is a historical novel set in Florence during 1490s Renaissance of Italy. It is about a deep study of a life in the city of Florence from an intellectual, artistic, religious, and a social point of view. It is published in 14 parts, published in Cornell magazine. It explores the Florentine religion and politics through the eyes of a beautiful and highly educated Romola and her husband Tito. Flex Holt, again the radical. It is a social and political novel set during the Reform Act of 1832. The action is set in Turby Magna, a town caught up in the transition from the old England rural farmland associated with the rigid class structure of to the New England of manufacturing associated with the breakdown of the structure. Now it narrates the story of Harold Transome, heir to Transome Court, who comes to claim his inheritance and campaign for a radical seat in Parliament and Felix Holt. Then again, his famous work is Middlemarch. The complete title of the novel is Middlemarch: A Study of Provincial Life. It was published in 8 installments during 1871 to 1872. The novel is set, in the uh, fictitious Madlands town of Middlemarch during 1829 to 1832. It consists of several distinct stories and a in a way, large cast of characters. Middlemarch is a work of realism that refers to many historical events: the 1832 Reform Act, the beginnings of the railways, the death of King George IV. It originated into two unfinished pieces during the years of 1869 to 1870, and the novel Middlemarch, which focused on the character of Lydgate, and the long story of Miss Brooke, which focused on the character of Dorothy. The heroine of the novel, Dorothea Brooke, an exclusively religious and pious girl who married a man, Mr. Coshman, who can not satisfy her emotionally or mentally. Bertha finally married Mr. Coshman, and Virginia Woolf called Middlemarch the magnificent book with all its imperfection is one of the few English books written for grown-up people. The character Will Ladislaw is the cousin of Mr. Coburn. Uh, this is the detailed study about her work. Now, this is all about George Eliot and her work so far. So, guys, in today's session, we have discussed so far about some prominent figures who hail from Victorian era, their style, especially in case of uh, uh, understanding their prose prominently going with novel and short story, and also uh, verse in place adding to poetry. Fine. So this was all about our discussion on